Hello everybody, Nitsa here, and welcome to my top 10 games that were featured at E3 2016. There are a lot of games to be hyped for, and I have written down over 20 that I would like to play myself. The only problem is I'm poor, so chances are I'm going to be playing less than half of these games. Now there are three main rules I have for this countdown. 1, the games obviously had to be featured at E3 during the conferences or Nintendo's Treehouse. Pretty straightforward. 2, expansions and DLCs will not be considered. And 3, I will be excluding games that were not given focus during the conferences, so I will give honorable mentions to the Telltale games The Walking Dead Season 3 and Platonic Games Yooka-Laylee. I love the TV show, despite how depressing it is, and while I've only played Season 1 of The Walking Dead, I am hyped to see where Clementine will go after we got to play as her in Season 2. Yooka-Laylee, I don't think I need to explain why, because you are just as excited as I am to play this gem. It's pretty much the Banjo 3 game we never got. They would have to try pretty hard to be anywhere near disappointing as a successor. Now, there's a very strong chance that I will not be including your anticipated game on this list, but that by no means makes me recommend those less. Some of us were interested in EA Sports games, whereas people like me were more fascinated by something else. This is my list, and it's all my personal preference and by no means intended to be a competition on what looks the best. So with that said, let's talk about the top 10 games that I am anticipated for that were featured at E3 2016. Yeah, I'll go with it. Watch Dogs 2. I haven't played the first game, but a lot of people were disappointed by it. Mostly because the first game promised an open world with a ton of realistic graphics and physics as you were going after your target. But in the final release, the scope of the game's quality was reduced down severely. It was by no means hated, just a disappointment to everybody's expectations. And if you watch the trailers for the second game, not surprisingly a lot of people are poking fun at how 360p will be the true quality of the final release. Now, either this game had a damn good marketing team, or this game will be the Watch Dogs 1 that we never got. Having not played the first game, I don't know gameplay-wise how much it differs, but it feels massive. You play as Marcus in San Francisco as you're a part of this vigilante hacking group known as DedSec. Think of them as anomalous if they didn't do everything behind computers. The whole purpose of the game is to expose Bloom Corporations for its criminal activities and inside jobs with the enemy hackers, CTOS. And the gameplay revolves around hacking technology for distraction, stealing information, or access into illegal areas. All while you are using stealth and third-person shooting when enemies are alerted to your presence. As a whole, it looks like a lot of fun. And just like these guys, I can only hope that I am doing the wrong for the right reasons. Spaz in the comments if you want to. After a huge controversy back in 2015, Silent Hills was cancelled despite the critical acclaim that PT got. I'm pretty sure most of you know the story behind this, so I won't go into details about it. However, despite Hideo Kojima being disbanded from Konami, his production did go independent with a fresh new game called Death Stranding. The trailer shows our main character portrayed by Daryl Dixon, Norman Reedus, as he is washed up on shore with a lot of dead wildlife and a fetus of possibly his child. As Norman cries over the death of Norman fetus, the baby suddenly disappears as he hallucinates the reality around him. This has only been conspiracy, but people believe that the baby represents the Silent Hills project that Kojima was never able to finish, and that the death that surrounds Norman's character is representing what Konami took away from him. There's even a huge scar on Norman's belly, as that also symbolizes a forced-out birth of life that Kojima never finished, that being Silent Hills. This is only conspiracy and not an actual confirmed intention, as it's very likely Kojima will never confirm this, as it could cause tension between his company and Konami itself. So far, there's no gameplay shown, and we mostly just see Norman being surrounded by death coming into the reality of what he's lost and that he has to move on. And visually, this is enough to make me want to play this game when it is finished, despite there being no gameplay. But what about the people who really don't care for this game? What's gonna drive them in to buy? During the Sony conference, we got a trailer to what looked like an indie game.
I hated Kitchen. Kitchen was horror.
Dude, shut the f*** up and just enjoy what's being shown to you. The game shows a character in first-person perspective walking around an unpleasant-looking house as you get an unsettling feeling, bits of gore, and a few jump scares that thankfully are not JPEGs. It almost seemed like a game that was going to compete with something like Outlast, which is getting a sequel later this fall. And when the trailer ends, I don't think anyone was expecting this game to be Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Now, usually a lot of the Resident Evil games are done in third-person perspective or a security camera hoping to make money on YouTube perspective. From what I checked, this is the first time a Resi game has ever done a first-person perspective, which will definitely bring out a lot of that horror aspect that some games are usually soft on. I can assure you, I had a few chills just watching this trailer from the E3 conference. And while people have made the comparison to Konami's cancelled Silent Hills, Capcom has clarified that Resident Evil 7 began development before that game was even revealed. But I don't care what it looks too similar to, because if it's a good step for the Resident Evil series, I'll be on board. Hell, there's even a feature for the VR. That'll be totally awesome.
Welcome to the family, son.
Oh, on second thought, I'll save my money. I'll probably need it when the shit hits the fan. Here's another Sony title that has actually been in development since 2007. In fact, this game was intended to be released in 2011 on the PlayStation 3. However, due to several delays, developmental problems, and hardware difficulties, the game has transitioned to the PlayStation 4. For a while, it looked like this game was going to be cancelled because of the developmental hell it's been through. That is, until it was reintroduced at E3 2015. I am of course talking about The Last Guardian. From the same people behind the critically acclaimed Shadow of the Colossus, we get a new thematic experience where you play as this young boy who befriends a giant hybrid named Trico. The game plays as a survival action adventure where you and Trico must work together as some guards are hunting both of you down. But you gotta tame Trico like you would with a wild animal and use the beast's instincts to your advantage. Honestly, since I haven't owned a PlayStation console since I got the PS4 in December 2015, I never heard of this game until it was reintroduced at E3 2015, so I didn't know its backstory until I did more research. And all I can say is, for a game that looks like it's gonna be a massive emotional experience, and one that has been in developmental hell for 9 years, and one that could possibly exceed Shadow of the Colossus, I will look forward to it when the game finally gets released on October 25th of this year. Unless they decide to give it another 9 years. I seem to find that people are quite mixed when it comes to mixing old times with futuristic technology. Sometimes it can work in a world of its own, whereas other stories like to take place in the distant future where technology and robots live like the way we do, if not diverse with humanity. Or as in this game's case, the robots have dominated the planet while humanity has abandoned Earth, but humanity is trying to take back their home as you control this hunter and archer named Aloy in Horizon Zero Dawn. I've heard about this game before, but never had an interest in it until I saw more at E3 this year. While we don't have too much information on the story, the setting is very basic. The game is open world and is stated to have no loading screens, which usually translate to fade to white screens for a few seconds so the game can render the next area, but I digress. In this world, you must use your survival instincts and futuristic caveman technology to kill robotic enemies and collect their parts for their resources to help you on your journey. And this world's equivalent of taming a horse is pretty much changing the wires in their circuits to ride them. While I personally didn't have an interest in this game before, I believe that I do now. And while I'm sure I'll have a lot of subject matter centered around nature versus technology, which should hopefully not just be a one-sided environmental message, the whole concept looks engaging enough that I think it's deserving to be on anyone's top 10 list. one word. Or is it 2 words? I don't know. Spider-Man, and holy crap does this game not based on a movie actually look so good. And most of the other Spider-Man games have ranged from okay to terrible. Except for Spider-Man 2, which is often said to be one of the best licensed games ever made. Sucks I never got to play the game when I had the chance. However, it looks like this game might exceed Spider-Man 2's great gameplay, and yeah, everybody seems to have faith that this will be a great game. There's really not much I can say since its reveal trailer is only a minute long, but when it does come out, I will definitely love to swing into action with this one. God, that pun was so unavoidable. I personally am not a sports fan. Not that they can't be entertaining, but I always preferred to play a sport myself rather than watch other people do it, or even play a video game on it. I'm sure they can be fun games and all, but when it came to EA's conference, there really wasn't much that got me hyped. But there was one game that did stood out throughout the entire conference, and that game being Fe. And damn does this game look adorable, and I mean that in every positive manner. In this game, you play as this little cub as you try to find your kind in the forest. But along the way, you gotta learn the songs of nature in order to connect with the wildlife that inhabits the forest. However, a threat comes along known as the Silencers, who intend to destroy the nature that surrounds you and the animal's very home. And that's pretty much all we got. But to be honest, that's all I need to know to want to play this game. I'm pretty sure some people will turn it off for its cel-shaded graphics and limited color, but honestly, I think that works more to the game's advantage. The forest is supposed to be mysterious, and you are bound to encounter with the unknown, so the limited color makes the visuals all the more engaging to discover and stunning to look at when the color does pop out. While it's pretty obvious who the Silencers represent, the entire idea of connecting with nature and learning about your home is such a great idea. The trailer never failed to fascinate me. This is definitely one world I would love to explore, and in the end, hopefully I can be more connected to nature than I ever could before. I love South Park. South Park: The Fractured But Whole is a sequel to the critically acclaimed The Stick of Truth. In the first game, the kids of South Park play as fantasy characters, but in this game, they are superheroes as seen in the Coon trilogy on the show. The Fractured But Whole centers around Cartman as the Coon, setting up a film franchise for every individual superhero, which is a similar approach to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But when half of the group decides to split up and go Civil War on Cartman, the Coon makes a not-so-subtle insult.
Go ahead, I bet you don't even get halfway through phase 1 on your franchise, DC Comics!
What's so funny is that if you listen closely, you can hear someone in the audience saying,
I thought Civil War wasn't supposed to happen until phase 3.
well, at least it's a lot better than the douche complaining about Kitchen.
I hated Kitchen. Kitchen was horror.
Shut up, Craig! Gameplay-wise, it's very similar to the first game. However, it does update one aspect that is quite polarized among fans and critics in The Stick of Truth, which is how combat is played. Instead of going all RPG style, it still goes RPG style, but with a mechanic similar to the Fire Emblem games where you have to stand on specific square spaces for direct attacks, range attacks, taking cover, and even interacting with objects and other units, which definitely adds a lot more variety to the combat system. As a whole, the game looks pretty amazing, and if your audience laughed throughout the entire thing, you definitely know that Ryan is not only good, but it feels like a whole new South Park season awaits. And I cannot wait to see what I can unwind. With Naughty Dog's final installment of the Uncharted series, A Thief's End, it's quite sad that we'll never see any more of Nathan Drake's adventures. But not only was this game a satisfying, solid conclusion, but it has plenty of things worth showing just for you to play. And it has hands down one of the best Easter eggs in video gaming since you could play Donkey Kong on Donkey Kong 64. That Easter egg, of course, being Crash Bandicoot. Ever since this Easter egg, many people have made the assumptions that maybe a new Crash Bandicoot game was on the way after having no game in a long time. But some people claim the speculation is less likely as Activision still owns the rights. However, during the Sony conference, we got confirmation that we'll be seeing Crash Bandicoot once again. in Skylanders. Now, to me personally, I am not interested in getting Skylanders, as you gotta pay for every individual character you can play as in the game. I'm sure it can be a fun game and all, but it's not the Bandicoot's addition to Skylanders that is number 2. That point will go to the Crash Bandicoot Trilogy Remastered. This one is quite a stretch since there's no gameplay footage shown of these remastered games, that being Crash Bandicoot, Cortex Strikes Back, and Warped. Now, if you remember the fact that I've never owned a PlayStation system until I got the PS4 back in December 2015, I have never played a Crash Bandicoot game since I grew up as a Nintendo kid. And while the Easter egg in Uncharted 4 is the only time that I have ever played a Crash Bandicoot game, I can definitely say I am hyped to play the first 3 games for the very first time. It'll be great to play a childhood favorite anthropomorphic who runs and wears pants for once. Now, before I get to my number 1 game, here are some honorable mentions. It was a close call to Resident Evil, but in comparison, I am more stoked for Resident Evil. But I am curious to see where this game goes, as it seems to be a psychological mindfuck kind of game. This didn't make it in my top 10 since I haven't played the first 3 games yet, so I don't feel as hype as probably the fans of the trilogy do. Regardless, it still looks great, and I can guarantee when I have the time and money, I will play the trilogy and probably choose Alien 6 over saving the galaxy. Not the biggest fan of hack and slash gameplay, but knowing that the games don't have a continuity between them, I am interested in playing the final release of this game. Though I think I am more hyped to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake, as I've never played the series in my entire life, and the 7th installment is considered the most iconic of the franchise. At least it looks better than the mundane sticker star we got on the 3DS. Looks like a lot of fun. Unfortunately, I won't be able to play it as it is Xbox One exclusive. Never played God of War, but seeing how this game plays like a reboot when it's actually a continuation and it revolves around you connecting to your son, I'd love to see where the series will take us on an emotional level. Some fans are disappointed that they are taking a more humanized approach to Kratos, but if the rest of the game is just as brutal as the series is, I think there's very little to complain about. And with that said... Okay, you all know what it is. It's obviously Breath of the Wild. That's right, despite the repetitive hours of Nintendo showing off this plateau and a few frame rate drops, I am hyped for this game. Maybe nostalgia is getting in the way of my judgment, as the Zelda series is my favorite video game franchise of all time, as I personally find no game in the series to be bad. But not only does this look visually engaging, but the entire premise is a huge mystery to us. The demo shows Link waking up like he does in almost every Zelda game. However, he has been in a 100-year slumber for reasons unknown. And so Link begins his journey after being guided by legit voice acting, and you start off your adventure in this giant plateau. And from there, you have no guidance or a linear path to follow. You can collect weapons, cook food, tame a horse, and use a jump button, holy crap, no Rock's Feather, as you can fight off some enemies or complete some trials with a particular item. And honestly, there's too much to say about this game that I could never watch all the footage presented. The great thing about Breath of the Wild is that it feels alive and massive, so it's never dull. And the intention is to make you choose where to go, as it's intended to make you figure out what you should do next, like in Zelda 1. And while there is a saying that you can just run to the final boss of the game, I highly doubt that is fact, as you did have to beat the 8 levels for the Triforce pieces in order to get to level 9 in Zelda 1. Honestly, I think it's more of a tease than an actual fact. While there's still a lot of mystery on how Hyrule got like this and why it is in ruin, I think that's all Nintendo needs to show us to get people wanting this gem for themselves. And since it will be released in 2017, it will be released on the working title console, the NX, as well. Hopefully by then, the game becomes everything we want it to be, because it seems like something a Zelda game should be. I personally never felt this much hype in my adulthood ever, and it was an awesome experience seeing this massive new Zelda game that we're gonna get. I'm sure some people will prefer games with more realistic graphics like Horizon Zero Dawn, but you know what? Graphics mean jack shit to the overall experience unless it's Bubsy 3D. And besides, it looks gorgeous. We're only seeing a small part of the overall world, and all I can say is, I would love to awake from my bed just to spend hours in this beautiful land of Hyrule. And so that was my top 10 games that I am anticipated for that were featured at E3 2016. Are there any other games that I didn't include that you're hyped for? Leave it in the comments below. And all I can say is, I am NitsaGamer, and breathe in that wild air, folks. Nature's healthy for you.